Welcome back to another video by Microgravity Mischief. The intent of this video was born out of the idea of moving large amounts of cargo to and from Earth to Mars. So in Kerbal Space Program here, I'm going to be demonstrating my idea with Planet Kerbin to Planet Duna, which is very similar. The foundation for any large spaceship that we've ever seen in the movies has always been a very large metal truss that everything is attached to, be it the fuel tanks, the engines, the cargo bays, and so on. What you're seeing here represents a cargo container that could hypothetically be flown up by Starship into low Earth orbit and deliver individual cargo containers that could then be docked together and then pulled in tight to hard dock. So one day I was thinking about the premise of these huge ships, and I was applying Elon Musk's 5-step algorithm: make the requirements less dumb, delete the parter process, simplify or optimize the design, accelerate cycle time, and automate. When it suddenly occurred to me, why not get rid of the truss and make the individual cargo containers act as the truss itself, thus doubling their workload into 2 jobs and reducing the weight significantly. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to undock this cargo container, deorbit it, as I had to build this all in the vehicle assembly building together, otherwise it was too wobbly. We have limited tools in Kerbal Space Program, so as you can see I'm using inflatable heat shields here because I can't build anything else to act as aerodynamic drag for the aero braking process in the game. SpaceX's plan for the colonization of Mars is very simple. They plan on building about 10,000 starships that are rapidly reusable so that they can fly from Earth to Mars and back during every transfer window, which I think is a great idea given that each starship can be used as a habitation module while things are getting set up. So thinking about what could possibly come next, it occurred to me, why not bring reusability up into orbit and keep it there permanently? This is of course assuming that we'll solve the problem of orbital refueling. Why not have some sort of permanent freighter system? So once all the cargo's in place, I'm going to go ahead and dock this second stage booster to the assembly, and you can see that it's equipped with heat shields as well. However, once again, limited by Kerbal Space Program Parts Unlimited, I was thinking that hypothetically the design of the heat shields would be similar to maybe a large tree spade truck, made of course with much lighter materials and designed to be heat resistant as well. So once this docking is complete, I'm going to rendezvous with the primary booster, which is very similar to the second stage, but it's a lot bigger as it has a lot more mass in front of it to push. The primary booster has just enough fuel to lift us into a highly elliptical orbit during our transfer window, where it will then separate, and the second stage booster will finish the rest of the work, which doesn't take much to get it up to an encounter with Mars itself. Then while the freight train there is on its way to Mars, the primary booster will go ahead and not deorbit but aero brake to recircularize its orbit to prepare for its next refueling and cargo lift. So I'm going to take us on a little tangent here and tell a story about one of the glorious days at work that I had. I've been known to talk about SpaceX and Tesla just a little bit too much for everybody's liking, and I think it does get a bit annoying for some of them. So in a sneaky roundabout retaliation, a coworker told me, "Steve, you should just start your own rocket company." So I paused to ponder what he had actually said to me, and I replied to him, "Well, I need money and technology." To which he then replied, "Is that all you need?" And at that point, the whole room erupted in laughter. I suppose I have a few good ideas now and then, but yeah, I'm probably not an Elon Musk in the making. So as I get ready to conduct the primary burn to bring our apoapsis up to a very high ellipse, I'm going to take the opportunity to tell you that each cargo container is capable of holding up to, I think, 150 tons to low Earth orbit. So anywhere from 100 to 150, I believe SpaceX can get to low Earth orbit. So if you multiply that by 7, we're looking at about 1,000 tons of cargo potentially per freight train run here. I'm not too sure how feasible this idea really is. It's going to be very fuel intensive, and I'm guessing that the primary booster there would be almost the size of the Super Heavy booster itself. I wonder how many launches it would take Starship to refuel that in orbit every time. Maybe looking at like 100 or more launches just to refuel that Super Heavy booster for phase 1 of this transfer burn. Not to mention having to refuel phase 2, which is probably a booster the size of the second stage of Starship. So that's at least 10 launches to refuel that bad boy. Now I'm going to do one lap in our elliptical orbit here and prepare the cargo second stage for its final boost to our Mars encounter. You know, they say that once you get into low Earth orbit, you're halfway to anywhere in the solar system, which is pretty much true. It doesn't take much here on this second burn to get us not only out of the gravity well of Earth, but to increase the apoapsis up to Mars's orbital height from the Sun. And voila, we have our Mars encounter. So now I'm just going to switch over to the primary booster and deploy the air brakes, or the heat shields as you will, to begin the air braking to recircularize the orbit and prepare it for its next mission. Then we'll continue here where we left off with our coast out to Mars. So the trick here with aerobraking is not to enter too deeply into the atmosphere, but since you're already captured in an Earth elliptical orbit, you can go as shallow into the atmosphere as you want and repeat the process over and over until you get back into a circular orbit. So in essence, you could barely dip into the Earth's atmosphere and do very little damage to the aerobraking system, thus keeping it in service for a longer period of time. I'd imagine that it would probably be a pretty good idea to have a CubeSat or two and a storage bay on each one of the boosters. Sort of like fighters on an aircraft carrier. Something small with high resolution cameras, gyros for attitude control, and compressed gas capsules for RCS thrust control. This way the entire booster could be visually inspected in between each mission to ensure that the overall integrity of the booster could be verified. It would also allow the engineers to run experimental trials through the atmosphere at different speeds and altitudes during each mission and collect data on the in-service wear and tear. Over time, it would capture vital data that drive mission parameters, allowing for an increased service lifetime of each craft. After our final atmospheric pass, I'm going to go ahead and coast up to the apogee, which is the highest point on the other side of the Earth, and conduct a prograde burn to raise our apogee up and out of the atmosphere, which will put us into a circular orbit, and we can go ahead and park it and wait for a refueling mission for the follow-on operations. Now our freighter has coasted quite a ways from Earth, and it's time to tweak our trajectory. It's important to note that the further you are from your target, the less fuel it takes to adjust your aim at the bullseye. Mars, of course, being the bullseye. It's so effective, in fact, that it only takes a few meters per second of thrust in any direction to move you thousands of kilometers towards or away from your target. Now we will coast the rest of the way to our Mars encounter. Here I will make a final correction to the trajectory. This is a quite important correction. If our freighter dives too deeply into the atmosphere, it will slow down to a suborbital velocity and fall to the surface. If we are too shallow in the atmosphere, we won't slow down enough to be captured by the Mars gravity well. At that point, the freighter would continue right on past Mars and into a solar orbit with little or no fuel left to recover itself without a fresh booster full of fuel. It looks like our freighter stayed inside the correct altitude corridor for a successful Mars capture. Now after we coast back up to our apogee, or highest point, another burn is required in the prograde direction to raise our perigee a little higher in the atmosphere. It really boils down to mass versus drag versus atmospheric density. We always run the risk of overdoing our aerobraking maneuver and deorbiting our payload. Just like our first stage booster in Earth's orbit, the freighter will coast up to apogee and conduct a prograde burn to finalize its circular orbit. Since Starship's second stage or payload stage has been designed to refuel using the resources available on Mars to process into methane and oxygen, SpaceX would then send up a Starship into orbit to rendezvous with the freighter and grab one of the cargo containers for transport back to the surface colony. The overall advantage of this system would be that the Starship system would spend less time traveling our solar system in a coast phase and more time doing shorter duration local work, thus optimizing its fully reusable advantage. And unless a rare metal deposit is found on Mars to sell back to Earth, the storage containers could then be repurposed or melted down at a Mars foundry to recycle and put to use locally. Now that the freight is in a circular orbit, the second stage and rear drag assembly will undock and redock together for the trip home. You'll notice that when undocked from the massive payload, our second stage went from roughly 200 meters a second to 1900 meters a second of delta V, giving it more than enough to complete a trip home to Earth. For those of you who don't play Kerbal but are interested in space operations and spaceflight itself, I apologize for running some of the footage at a very, very high speed. The intent is to get through this video without making it 2 hours long, and since I'll probably have a dual audience, I don't want to bore the Kerbal players to death. So what I'll do in the future when KSP2 comes out in about a month is make some video shorts on getting planetary encounters to Duna, Eve, or Mars and Venus and Jupiter, so that you understand what you're seeing when you're looking at the footage fast forwarded. Returning to Earth, we can use the aerobraking method as well. However, we have to reconsider our mass versus drag versus atmosphere, as all of them have changed dramatically. And there you have it, folks, the Kerbal Space Program Hypothetical Reusable Cargo Delivery System, or KSP-HRCDS. I'm just kidding, that's a ridiculous acronym. Let's just call it the Mars Freight Train, huh? Well, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, please.